want you to picture something for me. What's the worst thing that could happen to you? Got something? It's amazing, isn't it, how easily we can access these images. Okay, you got a thing or two? Well, I've got some bad news for you, and that is, what you're picturing right now probably ain't even close. The things that really affect us in life come out of left field. They hit us like a bolt of lightning. For you, right now, the worst thing is probably unimaginable. Some more bad news. Worrying about it doesn't work. I can get you to sit there and nurture that image and think about how terrible it would be, and how heartbroken and bereft you would feel. And you know what? If it actually happened to you, all that worrying would in no way have prepared you. I've really given you something to worry about now, haven't I? But despite appearances, I'm not here to make you more worried, anxious and depressed. I believe the media has got that covered. I'm actually here to do the opposite. I want all of us to move out of a world of fear where we are tyrannised by the what-ifs and into a world of hope, or even beyond that, a world of confidence. Now, to do that, we need to effect a mind shift. We need to stop focusing on all the things that can go wrong and instead focus on this, that even if the worst thing happened to you, you'd most probably cope. From what I've experienced, from the inspirational people that I've met, and from what I've studied, I've come to realise something, and that is, we should never underestimate the brilliant capacity we have as humans to cope with the really big things. In fact, I've come to believe that if we let ourselves, whatever happens, we can cope. So who am I to believe this, and why? Well, my name's Ingrid Poulson, and like all of us, I come with a story. My story of interest doesn't start when I was born, as fascinating as that was, but when I was 21, and my then 24-year-old brother suddenly suicided. It's really hard to describe what that's like to someone who hasn't experienced it. It's like being put on a completely different planet from everyone that you know and everything that you've known. And what's more, there's no scars to show how you're feeling or to demonstrate how you feel. So I drank a lot. I got my nutrition from cigarettes and from chocolate. Pretty much gave up on sleep, lost a ton of weight, and so on. And what I was really trying to do was show the world my scars. Look how much my brother means to me. Look how much his death has impacted me. But despite all of this, I survived. And before the year was out, it was to go off on a big travelling adventure that was to end 5 years later in Thailand, where I met my partner-to-be. We married and returned to Australia, where in 1999, I gave birth to a little girl, Marlee, and 2 years later to a little boy, Bass. Things between us, however, were strained. Arguments became more frequent, and eventually we separated. He didn't handle that separation well, and became increasingly violent and increasingly antagonistic until eventually I took a restraining order out against him. He broke that restraining order in the early hours of 15th of September 2003 to break into our flat and rape me at knife point. The next day, when he learned that I had gone to the police, he returned to the house where my father was looking after the children, killed the children, my father, and then himself. Now, I understand that my story is traumatic, but I'm not here to traumatise you. I just want to give you a picture of where I was at. At 31, I felt like I had lost everything. I'd not only lost my 2 darling children and my dear father, but when I left that house, I never went back. I left behind my job, my way of life, my car, everything I owned, my clothes. I was wearing borrowed clothes to the children's funeral. And yet, I'd always thought, like one of the investigating officers said to me at one point, you know, Ingrid, it could have been worse. You could have been killed, or you could have been hurt or killed. And I remember thinking, how is that worse? I'd always assumed that if I lost my children, that I would just disappear. You know, not die necessarily, but just cease to exist. But somehow, I continued to survive. And I even went to a doctor and said, you know, what's wrong with me? Because there was nothing wrong with me. slowly something else started to happen. I started to engage with the coping. I started to engage with the survival. I looked back on how I had dealt with the death of my brother, and something became very clear to me, and that was, no matter how much I showed my scars, it didn't work, and he never came back. So instead I looked at what I had. My mum, my amazing mum, wonderful sister, my step-family, the myriad of people that stepped forward and actually helped me walk my journey. And I made a promise to my father and my children. I will demonstrate how much you mean to me, not in how low I go, but in how I rise. And that's really where it starts, with this resolve. It's the first step of being resilient and bouncing back. And that resolve has to come from you, and it has to come from here. It doesn't matter what steps have happened on the journey so far. The very next step is up to you. See, the problem is, when big things happen to us, it feels like everything is completely out of our control. So to get that back, we need to focus on what we can control. So what's that? Can I get you to stand for me? Now, here's the challenge. Without knocking out your neighbour, can you stretch out your arms a little bit? Maybe turn side to side? Great. Okay. This is what's within your control. This moment, right here, right now, this body, this mind, and your response. And that's all. Can I get you to sit down? So, we are not always in control of what happens to us in life, but we're definitely in control with how we respond to that. And I was taught this in small part, believe it or not, by a taxi driver. Has anyone here caught a cab in Sydney fairly recently? So you'll know what I mean when I talk about the fact that you're probably in for a fairly stressful journey. Someone that's having a really bad day and would love to share that with you. Lots of braking, hand gestures and the like. Anyway, this time I caught this cab, and the cab driver was different. He was calm, he was courteous, he exuded non-stress. At one point, another cab driver wanted to enter our lane and was demonstrating this in the usual red-faced gesticulating manner. My cab driver merely pulled back, let him in, continued on without even a breaking conversation. And I was intrigued. I said to him, you know, my line of work is in stress management and resilience, and that was really good. How do you do that? He said, oh, that's easy. For me, that's a 1-minute problem. For him, that's an all-day problem. So part about being resilient and coping is in the art of letting go. Your response is in your hands, and it's up to you how long you hold on to it for. I'll never forget the woman that approached me after one of my talks and said, you know, I was raped when I was 18, and I've just realised I've given that man another 20 years of my life. So, and you know, even though that was really sad, I thought, thank God you're not going to give him the rest of it, are you? So your response is up to you. And part of that is that resolve. In this world of abdicating responsibility, I'm asking you to take it back. I'm not asking you to take responsibility for the bad things that happen to you in your day or in your life, but you need to take your responsibility for your response to that. You don't need to give away your power to the guy that cuts you off in traffic any more than you need to give away 20 years of your life to somebody that's hurt you. So what can help you with this? Well, part of it is about how you identify yourself. What's your identity? That's better. Now, we all look a little bit strange in this photo, but I like it because it marks a turning point for me. We're outside the coroner's court, and the reporters had been asking questions. And at one point, my mother stepped forward and she said, there's been a lot of talk about victims. We are not victims. We are 4 strong women. We are survivors. Now, which one is it going to be? Are you going to be a victim, or are you going to be a survivor? Because trust me, victim is not just a state of circumstance, it's a state of mind. Now, the problem is, there are advantages to being in the victim role. You can get compensation, you can get attention, you can get understanding from the people around you who look at you and say, well, if that were me, I wouldn't cope either. But what if you want more? Or what if your friends and family deserve more? What if the community or the world that hosts you needs you to step up and do more. Whether it's a small thing or a large thing, make it a point to be a survivor, not a victim. You owe it to yourself and you owe it to those around you. We have enough victims in this world. What else can help you to get through this? We have our resolve, we have our identity. Something else, support. Survivors don't try to do it alone. Yes, there are definitely points in your journey where it does take that inner strength and you have to walk the dark path alone. However, I believe if you take the first step, people will reach out their hand to help you along. Now, this is an interesting point. Who here likes to be that person that gives help? Reach out, give support, give help. Yeah, be the shoulder to cry on. Great. Hands down. Now, who here likes to ask for help? A couple of highly evolved souls, all right. It takes a bit of practice because the truth is it's very difficult to ask for and accept help. Now, if you bear with me, I'll tell you a story that helped me to come to terms with having to accept help in my life. When my brother died, we all went up to his house to support each other, and a couple of my mother's friends were there. And one really stood out in particular. She was so helpful. She was the one that provided the blankets, the shoulder to cry on, the food roster, etc., etc. And after a few days of this, I said to her, Jenny, thank you so much. You've been wonderful, fantastic, thank you. But how will I ever repay you? And isn't that how we feel? That often if somebody helps us, that we need to repay them in some manner. Anyway, what she said really changed my mind about that. She said, many years ago, before I was married, my fiancé was killed in a car accident. And I received so much help and support at that time that I've been waiting to be able to pay that back. So we don't need to pay back this person right here, right now. There will come a time, trust me, when you can pass it on. So what's the last part of the formula for resilience? We need to do this stuff every day. We need to keep ourselves in tip-top form, physically and mentally. Now, just ask yourself this simple question. How resilient are you the day after a night of bad sleep? Not very. What about when it's 43 degrees and the air conditioner's broken? All right? How kind and caring and compassionate are you when you haven't eaten all day? Or you're dying to do a pee? Right? Very basic things, but we tend to neglect them. So don't neglect these things. And also something very important. Every day you need to look for what is good. It was Einstein that said, the single most important decision you will ever make is whether or not to believe in a good universe. Now, isn't that true? Because whatever you believe is what you'll find evidence for. So directly after we were bereaved, we were having dinner together. And at one point I found myself laughing and I was immediately consumed by guilt. How can I be laughing at a time like this? And I confessed this to my friend in shame the following day. And he said, Ing, the sadness is there. You don't have to go and look for it. It's true. There's a lot of bad stuff going on out there. Equally, there's a lot of good stuff too. So I made it part of my mission to look for what was good, enjoy it, savour it, and be grateful for it. Every day, I work on building my bucket of sunshine so that if things, that dark side of mine pops up again, then I can flood it with reasons of just why life is worth living. Altogether, it makes a pretty easy acronym to remember. RISE. We rise to the occasion, we rise to the challenge, we rise up again after devastation and loss. Ultimately, we can rise above anything. Now, if you use this, I'm not going to promise you that you'll stop worrying completely, because I wouldn't want to deprive you of that. But I can guarantee that you'll start to feel more confident about the future, because you will feel more competent in how you will cope with it. Imagine that, a life freed from the tyranny of the what-ifs and lived in the joy of what is. And if we all did that, I believe that it could be the best thing that ever happened. Now, before I finish, there's a postscript to my story, because many people want to know, well, who are you now and what do you do? So, some of you may have noticed that at 21 I lost my brother, and at 31 I lost my family. Someone once rather ungraciously said, oh, are you worried about turning 41? Thanks for that. Well, guess what? Recently I just turned 41. So it's a good time to review my life. I get to train people in a topic that I'm really passionate about, which is about resilience. But more than that, I've married again to a wonderful man. We have a son, Miles, who is the light of our life, and has just started calling me mummy instead of booby. Fantastic. And some of you may have noticed this. I have not just been overindulging on your gorgeous local cuisine. I'm expecting again in September. Actually, almost 10 years to the day from when I lost everything. So I guess everything in my life is not necessarily perfect. I have bad moments, bad moods and bad days. And I also know that things may go wrong for me again. I'm not offered any kind of immunity because I've been through a hard time before. So I make sure I savour each of my moments. I really search for joy. I build my bucket of sunshine and I share that with as many people as possible. I look at what I have and I'm constantly amazed and ridiculously grateful. And due to that, I feel like I'm happier now than I've ever been before. And just between you and I, I'm ever so slightly looking forward to turning 42. Thank you very much.